So one more time, we need you to get your Bible, head over to the book of Second Timothy. It's the month of December, one last letter. We're wrapping up this month, the Bible reading in the letters of Paul with the letter to Second Timothy. Now, December is going to be a busy month. Everybody's got a lot going on. So probably, especially with the holidays coming, get a lot of front-end reading done to get you very familiar with this. Let's not shortchange the last letter of Paul, like the Isaiah class, right?
There's actually a lot of good stuff in here.
There is a lot of good stuff. We don't pass by it too quickly. So you chose this one as the last one, and I feel kind of dumb asking you to explain that because the letter.
I was about to say, I think you know the answer to this.
the letter really is clearly at the end, right?
Yeah. Paul expects to die soon, and that's. It's the last letter. This has kind of moved beyond letters to churches straightening out their business. This is more kind of the last admonitions of a man who knows he's dying or about to die to a younger man who he expects to carry on this work after him. So this is just kind of, in some ways, about a lot of the basic ideas, principles, viewpoints that motivate Paul in his work, I think, and. So you really get an access to the mind of Paul, what Paul thinks is important, what Paul thinks is dangerous in the world, what Paul thinks leads to spiritual maturity, etc.
Don't get too far down that road because I want to go back a little bit to the clues that we're near the end. Are you thinking especially of that little segment in the middle of chapter 4, 6, 7, and 8?
Yeah.
Is that the primary thing in this letter that pushes us that way?
Yeah, he obviously again thinks he's going to die. And then you even couple that with even just a little bit past that verse 9, do your best to come to me soon. Obviously he's asking him to bring some things. Which means he doesn't expect to be, imminently dead like in a week or something, given how ancient travel worked. But he does sense that this is the end. And even other little hints, verse 18, the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed, bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. You can always say that as a statement of hope, of Christian hope. But, in the larger context, that kind of hits a little harder too.
Yeah, when he has said in 6, the time of my departure has come.
Yep. So there's quite a bit around here that just says he knows he's done.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't want to compare the American legal process to whatever the Roman legal process would have been. But I do remember working with a death row inmate who, after a few years of being on death row, got a sense of how the process worked in the typical case, which was. And so even though he actually got several execution dates over the years he was in prison, 11 years in total.
Right.
When he got the last one, he knew.
Yeah.
Because it was that time in the process. And you almost think that Paul has some sense here, even though he's been in and out of jeopardy for a good bit of his life, that this one probably isn't going to end well.
Well, and that's the thing, right, is again, while we're past what the book of Acts records, this is all after Acts chapter 28, so we don't have any other biblical historical narrative to help guide us. The bits of church history that have come down to us. This is Paul's second time he's been in the hot water with Rome. Remember, because the book of Acts ended with him in prison. Obviously, he survived that and was released to go around again for a while longer. It's one of those things where the second time the state gets a hold of you, they're probably not going to screw up the case this time. So yeah, he knows that he's not getting out of it this time.
So I like this ending portion of chapter 4. You mentioned verse 9, make every effort to come to me soon, make every effort to come to me, verse 21, before winter.
Right.
There does seem to be an urgency there that, at least on the surface, it might be tempting to attribute to the circumstances of travel at that time.
Well, the winter. The Mediterranean becomes impassable during the winter,
right? Which would be a delay and prevent him from bringing these things. But you do almost sense, you mentioned this earlier, that urgency that perhaps indicated he was afraid Timothy may not get there in time,
right? And again, it's one of those things where it's pretty clear that Paul has some things he wants to get done. He's writing this letter full of admonition from a mentor to a mentee. again, the kind of things, like the last lecture professors give when they're about to retire.
Okay.
The last statement that somebody gives on their day of retirement that people are going to stay in the office and keep going after they're gone, especially if they believe deeply in the work that they do.
The exit interview.
Yeah, seriously. That's right. And so, and yet, I mean, the fact that Paul also wants, the books and the parchments, he may well have some other writing he wants to get done. We don't know exactly, but yeah, he knows he wants to get some things done, and Timothy's a key part of that before he dies.
Yeah. So the statements you see there in 4 that we mentioned, the time of my departure is hand, I do think sort of makes us read the letter in a little different way. And when you read it, thinking about that possibility, it really does kind of sound like a guy who's saying some things to a young Padawan that he wants to pass on to him. Maybe in the event he doesn't have another opportunity to say them in another way. I mean, you'd like for Timothy to get there, but if not, it does kind of sound like. Well, I think about dying people. I've seen this before, who would call like their children to their bedside.
Absolutely.
And so it's dad's final word to his son.
That's kind of what Jacob does with his sons before he dies.
Yeah, exactly.
Lays it all out for all 12 of them. No, that's right. And I remember even time, years ago, a brother I knew who knew he was dying, had children still at home, who recorded several videos for his kids that they could watch after he was gone, in which he was able to, share things that maybe they weren't ready to hear yet because of their age, but he wanted to be able to say to them when they were older, even if he wouldn't be alive, to say it personally. So yeah, I mean, I think we're familiar with these kind of a dynamic that dying people, especially when you have those you love who are still, especially under your care, perhaps, you want to be able to give them some final words of advice about how to do their life right.
So I think as you read this week, this would be a really helpful thing to be thinking about. I think it reads a little differently when when you imagine that this might have been the very last opportunity he was going to have to speak to this beloved co-laborer,
right?
And these are sort of his parting words to him. I think if you read through that, the thing that impresses me as I read the letter is it's just this whole series of admonitions, one after another after another. Kindle afresh, retain, guard, be strong, over and over again.
Yeah.
You see those kind of admonitions. So as you're making your way through the letter this week, I think that's really the way to be reading it and something you can be looking for. Think about it as the final words to a dying man, to a young man that he really cares about, that's going to sort of pick up the torch and carry on the work in his absence. And if you'll be pondering that and then come on back next week, and the next episode of the podcast, we'll try to put that together into a big idea for the whole book.